So this is a webinar-based platform. So we can't see you, and then once we specifically start, everyone's muted, so we can't hear you. So if you feel free to make as much noise as you want, and if you want to eat, I'm starving, but if you want to eat while you're watching, it's totally fine.
Just don't show us the food.
Yeah, we can't smell it, we can't see it, we can't hear it. Yeah, we are a little hungry. So. A few rules. This class is recorded. We'll have the recording a little bit later. It takes a few hours for it to upload or download. And it's a webinar again, so we can't see or hear you. Class runs for about an hour. We try to give you about 10 minutes. So if you have any specific questions that are relevant to what we're talking about, you use your chat or Q&A to send us a quick message, and if it's relevant and if we can see it, we'll address it right then and there. Otherwise, we'll wait till the very end of class. If it's something that's not relevant. Huh?
Sharon just joined us, Sharon Montrose. Thank you for joining.
Yes. I'm Yo Armendariz. I'm the owner and founder of Canine Learning Academy. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support. Julie and I have had a great time putting these classes online together. We were going to launch our courses, which had already been put on our website to launch May of 2020, and we just sped it up. So we had already a lot of content that we were excited to share. And so these group classes are just going to be a weekly class where we're going to be training the human, so we can really dive in and show you the why, the how, and then giving you homework, giving you opportunities to practice, and then sharing those videos with us so that we can break them down and give you some feedback. So few rules: when you do a recording, it should be no more than 2 minutes. So don't share a 40-minute video with us. I probably won't be able to get through it. Use our Facebook private page. I'll usually post a topic like Rowdy Rover homework, and if it's show me settle on a mat, something like that. You can snap a picture that says like, yeah, hey, I did it, or you can give us video and we can kind of give you some simple feedback. Something simple like, hey, you notice that your hand is in your treat pouch when you walk towards your dog. It's causing your dog to get up sooner than you wanted. So just some trainer feedback that'll give you a better idea of how to speed up the process for training your dog at home. Anything else, Julie?
No, I think that's good.
All right. We're excited about today's class. This curriculum we worked on, and we kept, oh yeah, let's add this, let's add this. It's gonna be pretty jam-packed. So I'm gonna, there we go. Okay, let me go into play mode. Remember to use your chat if you have a question. Today's topics, we are going to be talking about triggers and trigger stacking. We saw that a lot in the last week's class, a few dogs that, were just overloaded. We're gonna break down the mark and move and explain why. Breed-specific play and management like leashing versus tethering. Emergency bailout, just in case, just a dog's coming towards you and you just don't have a choice and you need to get out of there. We're going to talk about counter conditioning, which you really haven't addressed in our Rowdy Rover class because we haven't had an opportunity. But in this last week, I asked a few people what we can do to help. And some dogs are not used to having humans home all day. So our Rowdy Rovers, our dogs that are reactive to other dogs on leash, normally get to go home and rest all day and sleep. And now that the owners are home, they're not getting that really good sleep. So you might notice a little more overreactive behavior every time you go out for a walk.
I've heard this several times this week. My dog is acting crazy, or they're laying around too much and they're being lazy, or they're all up on you. They need attention. They're barking more. They need more walks. So making sure that your dog is on an appropriate schedule while you're working at home is going to be really important, especially for our reactive dogs because they don't handle change well. I don't handle change well either. So I need a really solid schedule. If everything in the world is chaos, I love a good list and a good schedule. So that's going to be important for your dogs as well.
We're going to go over settle on a mat. We're going to go through all the skills of settle on the mat, not just how to get on the mat, but we're also going to explain the different behaviors that you can teach, like place and spot. And then we've got a March Madness, a little homework assignment, a little tournament we'd like you to try, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. All right, so a list of triggers. So triggers can be anything that your dog thinks that makes them overreact. Puppies, a lot of adult dogs, you know, see a puppy, smell a puppy, and then it becomes a trigger. It becomes something that makes them react, they'll overreact. A dog on a bike, a dog can have a guy on a bike as a trigger. Last week we saw skateboard was a trigger, squirrels are triggers, kids at play. Last week in last week's class, there was like a group of kids that were playing on the corner. That was a trigger for some dogs. And then having other dogs on leash can become a trigger.
Absolutely.
So in class, we try to set it up so there's only one trigger at a time. If we have a dog that's reactive to humans and dogs, we'll normally, you know, try to work with just one at a time and not have two of the triggers in the same sitting.
So just go back for 1 second. I want to explain one of the bullet points. Triggers are antecedents. So I know that you guys are very smart and capable people, but what that means in this context, an antecedent is anything that happens before a behavior. So behavior being lunging, barking, pulling, even whining, whatever happened right before that. So in this case, it's a trigger. That is an antecedent. So what we do in that is to make antecedent arrangements to set you up for one small thing at a time, to be able to handle it at a distance. But when you're hearing us talk about antecedents, that's whatever comes before the behavior. Then there's a behavior, then we have a consequence. So we call that the ABCs.
In class, why we're talking about this is that there was a changing trigger for a couple of the dogs. At first, it was the dog was reacting to another dog on leash. And then as the environment changed, the trigger changed. And then it was like the dog was so, you know, just over threshold at that point because there was two triggers at a pretty close proximity. So understanding that even though you're working specifically on this trigger of a dog on leash, that trigger can change at any moment, and you have to keep an eye on your dog when you're out there walking your dog. So we're gonna dive deep into trigger stacking. A lot of you are gonna get this and like go, wow, this is pretty cool information. Some of you are gonna go, I don't get it. We're gonna try to give you as much charts and pictures as we can to help make you process this a little easier. On the left-hand side of this column is the behaviors that a dog might do, starting with something as simple as a paw lift or a lick. No, a lip lick.
Lip lick.
I spelled it wrong.
You spelled it right.
Okay. Lip lick. Whale eyes, right? If a dog sees another, whatever the trigger is, and they go, though the big white part of your eyes. The walking away, so the avoiding, and I use this example as if someone sits next to me and they kind of have this weird odor, I kind of give myself some space and I might walk away, right? As a handler, as a human that has a dog that's asking for more space, if you ignore that, like if you force me to sit next to somebody that has a weird odor that I want to get away from, I'm going to escalate, and so does the dog. And here's the escalation process to most dogs, and every single dog is different. But after you don't give space, or after they can get away, there comes the bark or the jump. And then at that point, if they're still not getting what they want, you're not listening, or they just can't get it, then they begin to show teeth. And it could be something, what do they call that Elvis lip, where their lip kind of lifts up, right? Yeah.
A little snarl is what it's
called.
Yeah,
snarl. After the snarl, they'll go into a low growl and then a little bit louder growl. That is why we stress never correct the growl, because the growl is asking for space. We don't say, no, no, stop it. We want to hear that growl and we want to acknowledge, okay, I hear you, let's go. After the growl, if you still continue to ignore your dog, you're going to see something like an air bite where it looks like they almost bit. Let me tell you, every single dog, if they want to bite you, they're going to bite you. The air bite is deliberately not biting you. It's the warning before the bite. And then you've got your bite. And then we have different levels of bite. I think there's like 6 levels of bite. And I've worked with dogs that have up to a level 5 bite. So we don't want to ignore the dog. On the bottom, we have the different triggers that we mentioned earlier. Dogs on leash, puppies, skateboard, man on a bicycle, kids in play. Those are all going to be different triggers that cause a different behavior for every single dog. So I'm going to have Julie explain how trigger stacking works. And I'll let you take it from here, Julie.
Yeah, so if you have ever been scared or nervous, I like to say almost in a car accident. So if you've ever hit something or you've ever been hit by a car, you don't get out of that and go, oh, I can shake it off and the rest of my day is totally fine, right? You're going to be more on edge. Your adrenaline has made you shaky. It's drained your energy. Your focus is down. You are not your best self when you're stressed, and neither is your dog. But as a human, we can talk it out. We can critically think. We can, use therapy. Yeah, a friend to vent and get that frustration out so that we can release some of that tension. Our dogs often don't have that because they can't speak to us and say, Mom, I'm not really feeling good today. Can we skip the walk? Right? We don't all have that option. So, being aware of these small communication styles, I say that there's, probably 11 steps before a bite. And if you're not paying attention to those first few steps, your dog's going to start skipping some. They're going to take 2 steps at a time and then 3 steps, and you're going to build on that anxiety until they feel they have no other choice but to get your attention through violence, right? So if I'm not addressing, well, my dog looks a little nervous, or they're backing up and I'm still pushing them or pulling them in a particular direction, my dog is not going to say, hey, I'm uncomfortable. They're going to show a bigger communication of barking or lunging so that I know, oh, obviously I need to bail out. But if that's the only way that you're listening to your dog when they're very loud or when they're over exaggerative, they know that that's what works. So our dogs figure out habits and patterns very quickly. So if bark, bark, bark means, oh, Mom will take me home now, then that's what's going to happen. Every time they want to get out of a situation, they're going to go crazy because that's the communication that you listen to. So in that, we've talked about all of this different body language and making sure that we're paying attention to our dog at the smallest level, using that whale eye, using that head tilt. I think for one of our dogs, there's even a sneeze. We have one dog in class, and that's his initial communication is he sneezes, then he scratches, then he lunges and barks. So that's something that the mom had never noticed before. And if we hadn't been there, picking apart each one of these steps, she may not have noticed that he was doing that every single time. So when your dog is giving you a small communication, they're not going to recover all the way from all that cortisol and adrenaline and just go back to normal because, oh, the walk is over and we're going to start over next time. For dogs, because their survival instincts are so good, the adrenaline and the cortisol takes days and months to calm down because that's what keeps them safe in the wild, right? They only have 14, 15 years to survive and to make the best out of their lives, whereas we're going 80, 90 years, right? I can recover from a car accident. I can recover from being late to work one day. My dog doesn't have that kind of time. She's on a very concentrated timeline, so her body is built to say, that is dangerous, and I don't want to do it again. Right. So each time it's going to get a little bigger, it's going to get a little more exaggerative. And it could be something that hasn't set your dog off before, but if they see a cat and then a kid and, oh, I think they recovered, we can keep going, and then the wrong car drives by, your dog is much more likely on that third or fourth or fifth time in the day, not just on the walk, in the day, to really go big and have that exaggerative freak out because you're not listening or they don't feel heard. So that's trigger stacking.
Yes, trigger stacking. And we have some really good sheets that came with the behavior adjustment training that are PDF files that we'll try to send over and kind of break it down a little bit more. On the right-hand side, we have different protocols for example, if you have a dog that has a trigger that is like kids in play and you have to have kids come over, then we're going to use management to help stop or limit the ability for your dog to have to see those kids in play. If it is something like dogs on leash and you live in the city, well, you're going to have to work through it. And that's where we work with counter conditioning. Counter conditioning is what we are using currently with behavior adjustment training. We're starting at a bigger distance and we're trying to work our ways closer and closer, you know, paying attention to the dog's body language. That's counter conditioning. But we have some dogs that have gotten enough exercise, they've done interactive feeders, and they're coming out the gate, you know, already barking and jumping. Those are the dogs that we would say that, you know, we've gone through our basic scenario. There's nothing medically wrong with your dog. There's, you know, it's just where they're at and they're living with anxiety and stress. And maybe it's because of the environment at home, which you can't control. So that's where you start to talk to your vet, and we would suggest maybe go looking for some, you know, for some other answers with medication to kind of bring your dog down a notch. And then lastly,
physiological medical issues. So first, not just the medical issues of the brain, but we want to always look at the pain and the spine and the nerves, and then hooking back around once you've done all of those other things. And now we can start focusing on the neurological, just like you would for a person with all of these symptoms. We want to make sure if there's an obvious cause that we address that. And then we can get into the more complicated nature of the behavior.
Environmental aids is like if you live next to a skate park and you have no choice. Environmental aids would be turning up your music, putting up your blinds and things like that to just give your dog another barrier, another management tool to stop them from having to hear that until you can work through it. So every single trigger that we've had come in from different clients, we go through those 4 different options, and specifically we try to come with the, you know, the least the easiest option to get through. With behavior adjustment training, we've gone through leash skills, we've gone through gradual prompts, and we wanted to dive in deeper into the mark and move, because now you're forced to kind of walk in your neighborhood. You may not be able to get out to a park. A lot of parks are closing. So deciding what you want to mark on the mark and move is completely up to you. We recommend if you have a dog that's reactive to dogs on leash, pick a time to go take your dog out where there's not a lot going on to keep them under threshold, and practice your mark and move without a lot of big triggers. So start with something that they're not normally, like it's not as big of a trigger for them. When you start your mark and move, there's 3 different ways that you can decide what you're going to mark on. Sometimes you can decide to mark when they look at the trigger. You can mark. You can also decide to use the disengagement. So your dog looks at a dog and then disengages. That's disengage. You can mark that as well. And then lastly, you will see some dogs that look at the dog and look right at you, and that's eye contact instead of actually looking, or they'll kind of like look in the peripheral vision and then look right at you, which is awesome. If that's what we want to train, you can mark that. The mark, someone's got a question, Julie. The mark can be a verbal marker like yes. It can also be a click if you want to use a clicker. And I'm a clicker trainer, so is Julie, but in this, I usually don't use a clicker because it's too hard to maneuver.
Too many hands, yeah. Definitely.
The other thing I have, I've seen a few people use, I've seen Selena use it with Spencer, is she gives him another cue. So instead of saying yes, you can also say, get, or find it, you know, something that your dog, or touch, whatever your dog likes, that's going to be like, oh yeah, I'd much rather do that than go react at this trigger over here. So the mark can be, again, a verbal marker, like yes, it could be a click, or it can be another cue. And then after you get that mark, you're going to want to move. And we talked about not just moving 10 feet, but moving 10 feet away from the trigger. And if you've got multiple triggers, you have to strategically figure out where you need to go. You can't move and then, oh my gosh, there's another trigger over here. So you have to watch the environment at all times to figure out where you should be. You do want to keep 2 hands on the leash while you're moving to your new spot, your new location. And then when it comes to paying your dog, it doesn't have to be food, but usually you start with food to get your dog motivated to follow you. And then space, which is what they really want anyways. And if it's not space, you can figure out what it is that you'd like to pay your dog instead. But you do want to pay them even if it's a simple verbal praise. All right, so I'm going to show you a quick little video on a few mark and moves. Again, we'll have this video in our Rowdy Rover.
Both hands on the leash right there. You'll notice all the way until he's hit that 10-foot space. And then he reaches in for something to grab for the dog. So making sure that we get we provide that space first before anything. I know some of you are trying to do too many things at once. So first we move, first we mark, then we move, then you reach in and get a reinforcement. So it's really important to kind of separate those things so you're not tangling yourself and your dog up in that moment. It's much more important for you, the handler, to be calm in that situation.
And you don't have to move quickly, but sometimes motivating the dog to move is moving quickly.
Yeah.
All right. Emergency bailout.
So the top one, this is my client. Her name is Jade, and the mom has let me show this video. It's called Get, which we've talked about before. We're in an apartment complex, and there's 50 million triggers around us all the time. There's a stroller that goes by, there's people, there's strange, big delivery guys that are coming through there all the time. There's no escape for this particular dog. So we went in the center, found some really, really good grass, and started playing a game to help bring her energy back down before we really focused on some more serious training. So this is Jade. You'll notice her head is down. So she looks over towards a trigger, she disengages, and then this is just for you guys, I'm showing the treat. I wanna make sure she seizes it. I'm going down. I wanna make sure she sees what I have in my hand. And then the general area that I toss it, so that she, as a border collie, goes through. You see how deep her nose gets. She gets really serious. That also signals to another dog or a person, I'm not really interested in you right now. Please don't come up and talk to me because I'm focused on something. My head is down and I'm looking for something. And most of the time, not all the time, but if you are not looking at a person, they do not feel the need to engage with you. And there's always some social awkwardness where people just do it anyway. But in this particular chance, it was really, really helpful for her in the middle of all this chaos to have something else to do, something easy and fun for us to do.
So when you're working on teaching these to get and find it, you don't want to teach it like when you really need it. You want to teach it like in your house, in an environment they're comfortable with, put it on cue, then you can take it out in the real world and actually use it. So that was it.
When I say get, my dog immediately turns around. She knows that there's going to be a ball, a treat, a love, attention, something behind her. So because we've done it so heavily in non-distracting environments. Here's Yo having some fun with some of our dogs. Yeah.
Okay, find it is a little different. Find it, how I teach it in the house is I put the dog away and I hide food all over the house. You can also do this in the grass, but I start off putting that cue in an environment my dog's comfortable with, or I think where we have Cooper and Bentley here.
This was Cooper's first time playing this game too, so you'll see him kind of get into it.
And then I let him in and I use the word find it as the dogs start to actually go and search with their nose. Perfect game for Easter, right? Easter egg
I was
hunt.
about to say, this is an Easter egg hunt. Everyone knows how to do this. I just totally thought of that. So if you've ever done this with kids, it's the same way with the dogs.
So find it. You can toss 5 or 6 treats in the grass and your dog goes, oh my God, and it starts using their nose and sniffing, and get usually directly towards, they're going to see something fly in front of them.
So our different breed groups, we have about 5 people here. So I want you guys to engage in the chat. Tell me what your dogs, oh, there is a question here. Selena, I promise we'll get to that question in just a second because we moved on. So we will address that question at the end. Tell me what your dog's breed is and which group you think they're in. So these are 6 of the 7 AKC designated groups. The last one is a hound group. Not many of us in the city have hounds, so I've kind of omitted that group. They're not unimportant. They're just not in this particular slideshow. My dog, Opal Blossom, has sheepdog, border collie, husky, German shepherd. So she's sort of a mishmash of working dog and herding dog. Oh, here we go. We've got herding ACD. What's an ACD? You'll have to explain that one to us, Sharon. Joanna, German Shepherd in the working group. Very good. Amy, working and herding because she's a husky, collie, Rottweiler, red heeler, Australian cattle dog. Oh, Australian cattle dog. Okay, so definitely in the herding group for sure.
Yes.
So the group that we're actually talking about today, it looks like very relevant to all of you, is going to be the herding group. So this is Yo's dog, Bentley. I used him here as an Australian Shepherd, Australian Labradoodle. He is an Aussie Doodle, Selena. An Australian Labradoodle is an interesting mix of particularly sporting dogs because of the Shepherd, but the Labrador is the big one in there, and then poodles as well. So we can break that down. It's a little more complicated, but herding dogs were originally part of the working dog group. They just separated in 1983 because there's a lot of different kind of work that our dogs can do, but specifically herding dogs are made to run in wide open spaces, to work independently, and to work almost continuously for up to 12 hours. So on a farm, my family has a farm, you send that dog out and they run and they work and they work and they come back in, grab some water, bite a food, and then they go right back out. So usually long distance cues, whistles or hand signals are really useful for these dogs. But these are dogs that love working in big, wide open spaces. So border collies, sheepdogs, corgis, and they all herd a little bit differently because they're made to herd different kinds of animals. So these dogs are specifically amazing at problem solving, independent thinking, and obviously they have the endurance because they're made to run 10 to 12 hours a day on a working farm. So
understanding and knowing what your breed of your dog is will give you an understanding of what kind of feeding, what kind of exercise, what kind of mental stimulation that your dog might need to feel like they've done their job and it can come down a notch. And that's why we're talking about it.
Right.
All right.
So specifically breed specific place. So this is my dog, sheepdog mix. You'll see Cooper in there. He's just being silly. But my dog and Yo's dog, Bentley, are both in the herding dog group, or at least that's their play style. So go ahead and watch. Opal bolts out after a bird. She goes into the ocean because there was a bird and she had to go and get it, right? Typical herding dog. She comes back out and then Bentley gets really enthusiastic, and I want you guys to watch this closely. So she comes. We have 3 what we call cuts or jutes. So he goes 1 side, 2 side, 3 side, and then he kind of nips to change her direction. Not in a painful way, but you see that little snap right there on the neck to get her to change her momentum in another way. So Bentley, being an Australian Shepherd and Poodle, Aussie Doodle, sorry. He's going to use his mouth more because Aussies they herd with their mouth. Opal is an Old English sheepdog mix, so she is made as a linebacker, right? She hits with her shoulder, she hits with her butt, she really uses her full force because she's got that size to block his direction, right? She's trying to push him out of the crowd there. So every dog is going to use their body a little bit differently, but this is something that we see, especially in herding dogs, using that mouth, using that body to influence direction. A lot of running. They love to play chase and tag. One
Agility.
dog goes, the other one chases.
Yeah,
Sorry.
So a good play style for them, or a good games to have is the flirt pole, frisbee. You see a lot of the herding breeds will go do a really good job of frisbee and agility, fetch. So understanding and learning a lot more about your dog's breed can give you some specific ideas of what you need to do.
And fun games and activities that are going to be fun specifically for your dog. So fetch, chase, flirt poles, agility. Herding dogs are consistently in the top of agility worldwide. So
the difference between leashing and tethering is what we want to dive into next. Obviously, you understand, like before management, you're always going to use a leash to manage the distance and manage your dog's behavior when it comes to another dog or greeting. There are 3 types of leashes that we specifically ask our clients to use based on what they're going to be doing with it. So the 15 to 30 foot leash, if you've got open space, you live on a farm, you can use a longer leash to allow your dog to explore, like we do in our Rowdy Rover live class, like at the park, right? We can let them go and explore, they can go sniff, and they build confidence. The environment's not so scary. That's what we would use a longer leash for. Also for dogs, for people that have dogs and they dream about having them go completely off leash when they go hiking, this is a step you would take to manage the dog completely running away by keeping them on a longer leash. The 8 to 10 foot leash is ideal for practicing recall. So even when you're out on a walk and you've got an 8 to 10 foot leash and your dog slightly goes in front of you, practicing that everyday check-in or recalls is a great way to keep your dog engaged and bond with your dog and make him or her realize you are awesome and you're an amazing person. Lastly, 6 foot leash is what we usually use for walking in the city. And I know that one of our, I think Laura just got a fine, or no, a warning, basically a warning for using a long leash. So you do need to be mindful of animal control when they come near you or come around. You got to make sure that you're back onto a very 6 foot, I think it's 6 foot or 8 foot, I can't remember what it is, but
6 foot is the maximum length. But also when you're around other people and other dogs, it's just better to kind of shorten the gap in between you and your dog so that you have more of a chance of getting their attention rather than being at that 10 foot spot and going, hey, I hope you come back to me.
And when you're in the city and you're forced to have even tighter quarters, you're going to go even shorter, 2 to 4 foot leash, right? Which is what we're talking about next.
So tethering, this is going to be important, especially when we're training our dogs on things. A lot of us have bigger dogs that we need both of our hands for. So if you're not so coordinated, if you're having trouble with the treat bag and different, cues and clickers and all that stuff, sometimes it helps to just go ahead and attach the dog to your waist to help you and your mechanics get down, and then you can add one more thing in your hand. We also use this to practice recalls. If you're by yourself, you can always tether to a solid surface like a pole or a tree so that you don't have to worry about the leash slipping out of your hand. Or if your dog is stronger than you, this is going to be really important so that a tree can hold them, that you don't get dragged down with your dog when you're practicing, but also to keep them in a specific place. So if you're training inside and you have a wide open concept like Yo does in her house, you can see right now, when we have young puppies or our dogs are in board and train, we can't have them running around on all 4 floors of her house, right? And we don't have enough baby gates and doors to confine them. So one of the most simple answers is to tether them under the table, set up a nice comfy bed, and give them something to chew on so that they can relieve their stress, give them an activity, an appropriate activity to accomplish on their own while we're either working or I'm training, settle on a mat. It just keeps them in that area. But I do want to stress that your dog should never, ever, ever be unsupervised while tethered, and only tethering when they're on a harness. So we do not want to add any extra stress. I did have a dog that died when he was younger because he was tethered to his collar and he took a wrong turn. So just knowing that those are very dangerous things we want to be mindful of, but tethering can be a really useful tool when practicing training and when you're just in your house, right? All of you guys are home all the time right now, and your dog's probably up in your face and in your lap and all over you all the time. So let's give them a particular spot that only they're allowed in. Put them where you want them so that you can have some work time or peace and establish a bit of a normal schedule in your house. Otherwise, it's all going to be crazy for the next couple months.
And give them something to do.
Right. Absolutely. And so on our resource page, at the very end, we have our favorite long-term chews, enrichment feeders. All of those things are great to give them while they're tethered.
So counter conditioning and desensitization. Did I say it right?
Hey, you did it!
We're going to dive in deeper on that, but is what we use when we're working with our dogs that are reactive with other dogs on leash. We're desensitizing the process of exposing them at a distance that keeps them under threshold. And then we're counter conditioning because we're changing their mind or changing the behavior that they were doing before for an alternative behavior. So this one specifically for you, Selena, we talked about counter conditioning, the human leaving the house. Now it's usually two parts. First, you have to teach your dog to stay in a particular place. And then we have to teach them the distraction of you going towards what normally is the trigger. The trigger of you turning the door to leave causes some dogs to overreact, bark, follow you, lunge, whine. Those are all behaviors that are happening because of a trigger. So in this video, we show you what it should look like. And in the next video, we're going to show you how to teach it.
Especially if you live in a house where you do the exact same thing when you go out the door every day. You grab your keys, you grab your bag, you put your shoes on, and you go out the door. Your dog is noticing all of those things. So we want to take each step by step in this process, literally step by step.
Yeah. So here we have, we've already taught the dog to go into a particular place, and we're showing you the distraction of leaving. We're also working on distance, right? Treat placement is important. So sometimes you might want to turn the dog's nose if you need to. Otherwise, we typically will place the treat placement right between the two paws. So if you do a lot of repetitions, don't you think after a few repetitions of your dog getting, let me just pause that, getting a treat or getting a reinforcement that they like, whatever it is, that they might change their mind about you leaving? If you were to practice something like this, instead of you leaving, which is the trigger, being a behavior of or a feeling of sorrow and, oh my gosh, they're leaving, if you were to reward them or if you were to reinforce that calm behavior, they might change their mind. They might actually go, please get out of here. Give me some space.
Right.
So we work the distraction all the way to the door. So here we have touching the door, turning the door, opening the door 1 or 2 inches, but we never go from touching the door to opening it completely and then leaving. So even when I have Curtis practicing the leaving the house, it's one shoulder out, 1 foot out, 1 head out. We don't completely disappear. We're making sure that the dog stays under threshold. This is the exact same stuff you're doing with Rowdy, Rover, the outdoor, class with dogs that are overreactive with another dog. You're doing the same thing with a different trigger. Same exact thing. Keep the dog under threshold, change the dog's mind about the same trigger that normally causes a different behavior.
Right, and we set Bentley up at this particular spot to set him up for success because he was farther away from the door, right? So if you're practicing right next to the door and you pop that door open and the dog sticks its nose out, Well, that wasn't a very successful repetition then. So we want to give him the most opportunity for success by putting him farther away from the door. And here we made Curtis run up and down the stairs for a while. You don't have to run, but doing this slowly and at your own pace is the point of this exercise.
I put him on the stairs because I wanted Selena to see what it would look like with Spencer, because her stairs go right where the door is. So I showed her, I wanted to show this example. You can get a really good workout if you practice this. And
Curtis did.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like. And now we're going to show you step by step on how to teach settle. So there's play, spot, settle. I don't think we put that slide in this one, but if you're asking your dog to hold on, I'm going to be right back. Let me go see who's at the door. That cue for us, that behavior is go to your spot, place. Someone has a question. So we teach go to a spot, go to a place, crate, bed, settle, all the exact same way. The behavior looks the same, but for the dog, it might end with the sit, and for the dog, it means hold on. This is going to be really, really quick. I'll be right back. Settle on a mat for us when we're teaching it, and they go through the whole process means lay down, relax. It's going to be a long, long time. So this is the steps for a long, long time. It might not be the behavior that you would want to use for going to the door, but it might be the behavior you would use if you were actually leaving for the day. The beginning of all of those behaviors, spot, crate, are all exactly the same. Step one, get the dog interested in whatever it is that you're talking about or whatever it is that you want to teach. Here are some examples of how spot, crate, settle are all used in the real world. So this is crate. This is a bag crate. We have a wired crate. So we're still yelling out the same cue. It's all taught exactly the same way. For crate, for us, the end behavior is go all the way in and then turn around and lay down.
So knowing what the end behavior is, right? If you're asking your dog to do something, bed, mark, place, we're asking them to do something very specific. So in your mind, as the human, you need to know, do I want them to sit and stay on their bed? Do I want them to lay down? Do I want them to rush in the crate and it's okay that they stand? Really have a clear image of what you're asking your dog to do before you start teaching it.
And we get to the end behavior first before we put the cue on it. We use a method in our program called shaping, where we literally, and you're going to see it in just a second, I'm just kind of setting it up, where we're going to present the object, and in any interactive with the object, we're going to mark. In this portion of the video, you see that we've already got the dogs on there, and now they're going through their 3Ds. This is where a lot of humans get stuck with their dog. The 3Ds, distance, duration, and distractions. And you see these young puppies working through all of them. We're leaving at a distance that we can keep them on the mat. They're keeping them under threshold. We're also working with distractions because they're right next to other dogs. And some of them are there for a pretty good duration.
And it's okay that that puppy, messed up or made a mistake. He just simply told him what to do. And then you'll notice he stayed a little closer. He brought the criteria back down to just duration instead of adding the distance and the distraction. So working at a level that your dog can accomplish really well.
By knowing all the steps, now you'll know how to go up and down. So step one, you need to know what you're training first. Step one is have a plan. If you're going to teach spot, what does spot look like? Does it mean go to that rug and sit down? Then that's what your end behavior is going to look like. In this video, we're going to show you all the steps all the way to settle and lay down and relax. So very first thing is any engagement that dog has with the object that you're standing next to and looking at, you're going to mark, and then you're going to toss to reset the dog. Then you're going to up the criteria. So you're not going to mark until there's maybe 1 paw, 2 paw, 3 paw, 4.
And the reason that she's tossing the treat is to get that continual drive of going and getting to a specific spot. We can add duration, we can add distance afterwards, but the beginning of the behavior is just going to this area. So that's why she's treating him off, so that he has multiple opportunities to go back to the spot and get rewarded.
And after 3 or 4 times, I know, and we all know, that the dog we're working with actually knows the behavior without a doubt. And at that point, we can add the cue. The end behavior was get on the mat and lay down. So technically we're done with that portion. Now I can put it on cue. So this is where I would add it on, put it on cue. If at some point you're training a brand new behavior and your dog loses interest, specifically with like a rug or a dog bed or something like that, you pick it up and then you start over like we did at the very beginning. You're going to set it back down. So you make it more interesting again. By removing something, all of a sudden your dog is like, wait, what just happened? And then they're going to come back and show some interest. If your dog walks away and doesn't show any interest, it means that they're done and they're like, they want a break. So trying to force them to go through learning is not going to be productive either. So once we got to the end of the behavior, it's on cue. For settle, since we're teaching them to relax, we no longer use a clicker. If you're using a clicker, we focus on adding duration. To add duration, we simply just give 3 treats in a row. So we ditch the clicker. We no longer talk. We don't say anything. We don't mark, because that gets them excited and gets them back into training mode. We're trying to get the dog to actually settle down and relax. So step 1, duration. Step 2, we start talking about distancing ourselves. The human is now leaving, like we did earlier with the stairs. We use this as the working the clock, little tiny steps away. His elbow.
Always coming back to home base. Your feet are returning to that initial starting spot. You're going a couple of steps away, and then look, her feet come right back to that initial starting spot. So she's always starting from the beginning. No matter what step she's getting at, she's starting from the same place.
If your dog gets up when you take 2 steps, you would then go back to maybe just moving your shoulders back or taking a half step. After adding distance of some kind, then we can go into adding some distractions. And when you're picking distractions, we've got several different distractions. Earlier we saw the door. This particular distraction is Julie working with Cooper, and she wanted to sit down and work on a computer. So the distraction of her pulling out the chair and sitting down was getting him up from the spot. So it took a second to work through those distractions, and this is what it looks like. Small movements in the chair, pay the dog. Sit down, pay the dog. Sit down, turn your chair, pay the dog. Sit down, turn your body, look at your computer, pay the dog.
So obviously it's very fast forward.
Yeah.
But all of the steps that get me towards being on my computer, which is touching it and then going back and doing each little step.
So those are the 3 Ds all separately. You would work each of those separately over and over, weeks, months. I mean, it does take a long time to get past those before you start adding the 2 of the 3 Ds. So 1 at a time, and then you can start putting 2 of them, and then you can add all 3 together. Oops. All right.
We're running out of time really quickly, Selena. I promise I will get to this question. I'm going to send you a personal response because it is a particularly personal thing for your dog. It's a great question, though, so I do want to address it. This is my girl, Opal Blossom, and we had so much fun with this, guys, okay?
This is your homework. Pay attention.
This is your homework. So getting 6, 7 different kinds of reinforcement that your dog, so my dog is a super foodie. So I brought out the blueberries, yogurt, peanut butter, different kinds of treats. And one by one, I was able to, or I guess 2 by 2, getting each one and presenting it to her equally. So I'm not looking at the treats, I'm giving them to her very objectively, and I'm letting her decide which one is more valuable to her. In the end, it turned out to be the Honest Kitchen treats, which I was like, really, you passed up peanut butter to go for the standard treats? But that was her choice. So you're gonna work through it 2 by 2 to find out what is my dog's most valuable reinforcement, and then using that when you're in the most difficult of situations. So when Yo and I were in KPA, Karen Pryor Academy, we had to do this with our own dogs, and finding out what the reinforcement value of each thing that we were trying, because some dogs don't like yogurt, and then some dogs do. Some dogs are massive meat eaters, and then some dogs would rather eat a piece of corn. So figure out what your dog is motivated towards, presenting them 2 at a time, and then the winner of that 2 goes on and you compare the next thing. So start off with your kibble, your standard treats, and then you can introduce some fruit, and then some yogurt, and then some peanut butter. Vegetables. Yeah, try things that are in your kitchen right now. Don't go too overboard. This was her breakfast, so she had a blast with this. But this was just a fun game for me to know, hey, what is my dog telling me? She's telling me that what I think is the most valuable is not what she thinks is the most valuable, right? I thought she would go for the peanut butter.
Every environment's going to be different. So if you run this tournament at home where your dog's mostly really comfortable, you're going to probably have a different winner than if you go out in the real world and then your dog, you know, has a different mindset. So important.
She had so much fun with this. I put her on her settle mat. This was part of our distractions. I put her on her settle mat. I presented things 2 by 2, and she got to do the choosing. So she had a lot of fun. So just a quick recap, because we're going to wrap this all up. We talked about trigger stacking and your dog's different triggers. So making sure you understand what the antecedents are that are affecting your dog. Mark and move. So marking the behavior that you want and moving a full 10 feet and then reinforcing the dog, whether it's another 10 feet or where you are. Breed specific play. Each week we're going to go through those different groups. So stay tuned, stay involved. I want to get through every type of dog that we have, hopefully. Management, leashing versus tethering. Both of those are important management tools. Did we go over the emergency bailout? That was something that we went over.
Get and find it. Yeah.
Get and find it. Counter conditioning and desensitization, really hard words, but very important for training. Settle on a mat, that's also part of your homework. So we want to see a small video of your dog settling on a mat. If it's your first time doing it inside, but for you more advanced dogs, I'd really love to see backyard or maybe in the front yard or in your apartment complex. You don't have to go down to 2nd Street, but we want to see some kind of difference, you taking the effort and taking your dog out to do this somewhere. Your March Madness treat tournament, let us know what won with your dog, right? Because mine was really surprising with mine. And then your homework is to submit a 2-minute video or some pictures of you guys accomplishing these tasks out in the real world, even in your home, doing something, because we're all home and we're all stuck in this and our dogs are going crazy. So let's give them some mental exercise, and it doesn't have to be expensive or add a ton of extra time. We just want to make sure that you guys are engaged and that your dogs are getting their energy out. So if you have any other questions.
Time for like 2 minutes I have another meeting at 7:30. So I can't see the questions.
So Selena's question was, after I do the mark and move, is there an issue if I then continue in the direction of the trigger, because Spencer uses this to get more used to a trigger? So that's a really wonderful question. What I want to say is that mark and move is used to get your dog away from the trigger. So experiencing it in a more under threshold by adding that distance and giving them an opportunity to slow down, process, and then maybe try again. If you're moving towards the trigger, if you're influencing your dog in that direction, we're not necessarily giving them the space or the time to process that information. So you could inadvertently be leading or reinforcing that engagement without them choosing. So I would say if you're using a mark and move, we want to move back away from the trigger. But if if your dog is not showing stress signals, you don't necessarily need to use the mark and move. You could keep continuing forward as long as your dog is under that threshold point. Mark and move is not to be used all the time. It's just when you notice that your dog is really having trouble disengaging and you need to move them further or out of a situation that may turn into an exacerbative. Does that answer your question?
I like having some of my clients actually practice mark and move when they don't need it, so that their dog gets used to moving. But I think, Selena, for you, when you see that your dog is going through the different body signals that's saying, hey, I need a break, or I need some space, just do your slow stop. And that's where we check in. If you do the slow stop and your dog disengages, it means that you can keep going forward and they can keep moving forward. If you do the slow stop and your dog ignores you and continues to stare or actually goes back into a pool, then we do need to do the mark and move. So that's how we tell the difference in our clients, whether you're moving forward or you're moving back, is if you start that slow stop and they listen from that slow stop, you can continue going. All right, okay, that was great. You checked in, let's keep going.
So it's all about your dog and listening to watching their body language and making sure that you're taking the appropriate steps. So you said, I'm not encouraging them to go forward towards it. I'm specifically using it when we're walking down the street. And urban bat is a whole nother game. So we will that's a definitely more advanced topic, but I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. We are going to go into a lot more urban bat because we're forced to be at home and everyone's using their neighborhood. So that's what we're setting this up for, this class, and a lot more information like this so that you can understand the why, and then when we apply it, you'll go, okay, I get it. So
are there any other questions? Please send them to us, send your videos into us so we submit them on the private group so we can all see and enjoy them together, because we all have so much time on our computers. We really hope that you and your dogs are staying safe and sane. If you have any other questions, comments, concerns, suggestions for next week, please go ahead and send them to us, whether in a private message or on the group, and we will do our best to provide content that's most helpful for you guys.
Again, thank you so much for your ongoing support and for being with us. We really appreciate it during this time to share this opportunity to give you this content. So thanks again, and we will sign off. And again, you'll get a copy of this link hopefully sometime tonight or tomorrow.